Hello and welcome to Bonnets to Boats. Today we're looking at that most famous and most controversial of all canal arts, roses and castles. Roses and castles are iconic, but their origins are hotly contested, and honestly we will probably never be certain of the whithertos and whyfores. Roses and castles are a much older tradition than many people realise, and there's evidence that shows it was in existence as far back as the 1820s. The popular theory that the Romany population came to the canals and brought roses with them is highly improbable, as for a start there is very scant evidence that the Romany people joined the canal force at all, and the dates of the artistic styles don't match up. It's most likely that roses and castles are simply the product of that age-old phenomena, the trend. Just before the canals, wealthy young ladies looking for something to do began to indulge in a number of hobbies, decoupage and japanning in particular. Decoupage would remain fairly popular, and it involves taking paper decorations, sticking them to an object, and using lacquer to fix them down. Japanning was similar, and involved mimicking the very popular and very expensive Asian lacquerware that was being brought over in the holds of the tea clippers. As is the nature of trends, it filtered down the social scale. The Industrial Revolution allowed for mass production, and by the time we know roses and castles were definitely a feature of the boats in the 1820s, Birmingham and other places were producing cheap Japan tinware for the masses. The most popular theme for japanning was, you won't be surprised to hear, fantastical landscapes and bunches of flowers. Much like when the motorways were first built, the canals didn't appear with a full infrastructure of services, and the first boat painters would simply have been jack-of-all-trade painters, who could have been painting a dray in the morning and going back to paint a clock in the afternoon. Clock faces of that period do indeed bear remarkable similarities to the castle scenes we see today. The most important thing to remember with roses and castles is that the art we see today is not the same art that would have been seen 200 years ago. The First World War decimated the population of boat painters, and rapid progression of the internal combustion engine after the war heralded the slow move over to road transport. Prior to the First World War, boat paint was far more flamboyant than monochrome photos would have you believe. We have accounts of old men in the 1920s recounting how, in their youth, the boats were much more highly decorated, and one man even described the boats of the 1920s as plain and dowdy, compared to the ones that he knew as a child. Flowers weren't restricted to roses either. There were bluebells and dandelions, pansies and unidentifiable flowers in bright colours. The oldest photograph of a narrowboat to date is one taken around 1856, and you can just make out the two castle panels flanking the sign writing. In 1858 we get the first written description of the boats and the iconic water can. The boatman lavishes all his taste, his rude, uncultivated love for the fine arts upon the external and internal ornaments of his floating home. His chosen colours are red, yellow and blue. The two sides of the cabin present a couple of landscapes in which there is a lake, a castle, a sailing boat, and a range of mountains, painted after the style of the great teaboard style of art. The brilliancy of the new 2-gallon water can shipped from the Bankside painter's yard displayed no fewer than 6 dazzling and fanciful composition landscapes, several gaudy wreaths of flowers, and the name of its proud proprietor running around the centre upon a background of blinding yellow. This description of a teaboard style of art reinforces the theory that the design harks back to Japanware, and could also suggest that castle scenes we have today are less changed than the floral arrangements. The castle scenes are very similar to the popular willow pattern transferware that dominated the reign of Queen Victoria. Not only were the canal boats carrying transferware as cargo, but more often than not they were carrying it in their own cupboards. Willow pattern was everywhere, and it's not a great leap of the imagination to think that a boat painter might have brought his lunch to work within willow pattern dish, and after he'd had his bait, stared thoughtfully at the bottom of the bowl before taking up his brush. Although each painter had and has their own take on roses, the type can be broken up into three very broad types: the Uxbridge, the Knobstick, and the Braunston. Uxbridge roses are a dying breed. They're very much a Marmite rose, being extremely simplified, and with the Clayton's cabbage being the extreme end of the scale. The infamous Clayton's cabbage was the work of one man, Fred Winnett, painter at the Thomas Clayton Yard in Albury, and some boaters were so fearful that he would paint his roses in their cabins that they would remove the cupboard doors before putting the boats on dock. Knobstick roses originated from the brush of Bill Hodgson, painter for the Anderson Canal Company. There are various stories behind this name, with the most popular one being that a company official used to check on their boats with more zeal than was perhaps necessary, and would carry a cane topped with a doorknob-like silver ball. The boatmen, not appreciating this surveillance, would comment to each other, "Look out, here comes the Knobstick," and the name stuck. Bill Hodgson was a talented artist who rebelled against his apprenticeship at the Crewe Railway Works and went off to be a painter. His roses were executed in a hyper-realistic fashion and highly prized among boaters. When boatmen painters took up their own brushes, they mimicked Hodgson's work to the best of their ability, but accidentally formalised the method, creating the Knobstick roses you will see today. The Braunston rose is the dominating flower of the waterways. This is a stylised rose, made with a quick, bold brushstroke. This type of rose was found all over the Midlands, but it was the village of Braunston that brought it to the public eye when Tom Rolt wrote his bestseller, Narrowboat. Every dockyard had its own style, and a practised eye can recognise the different roses and castles produced at different yards from one end of the country to the other. Boatmen themselves added to the variety, picking up their brushes first in the 1930s when the Grand Union Canal Carrying Company mistakenly tried to turn out their new boats in a sleek Art Deco style and refused to pay for any cabin decoration beyond the graining. Graining, or scumbling as it's also known, is the art of wood effect painting. It can be extremely accurate, making a piece of cheap plywood indistinguishable from that of a fancy mahogany panel, or it can be simplistic, nothing more than a comb dragged down the paint and feathered out. This was an art form in itself, with country houses employing grainers to make things look more expensive than they actually were, but on the canals it tended to stay relatively simple. When the canals were nationalised in 1947, the newly formed Docks and Inland Waterways Executive tried to do away with roses and castles again, supposedly to show what a forward-thinking modern company it was. This backfired spectacularly, and their answer was to have transfers created for both roses and castles, coming full circle from the days of decoupage. Today all forms of canal art from roses up are considered in danger by the Heritage Crafts Association, as well-intentioned people presume that simplistic is the same as simple. We could spend many hours looking more at the story of roses and castles, but that's for another video. This is the last of our Bonnets to Boat series, but I hope you'll join me and Heatherfield Heritage again. If you click the subscribe button, you'll get notified when we post something new. Thank you for watching, and see you again soon.